Hey everyone, and welcome back to the One Code Camp channel. So today, we're diving deep into the wonderful world of React hooks, specifically the mighty useEffect hook. So if you've ever struggled with the lifecycle methods and class-based React components, this hook will be your new best friend. So by the end of this video, you'll be well equipped to leverage the useEffect hook effectively in your React projects since this is a versatile tool that can significantly improve your code organization and keep your components clean and efficient. So let's get started. Hi, and welcome back to our React Hook series. So today, we're diving into the useEffect hook, which is one of the most powerful hooks in React for handling side effects in functional components. So this is part one of a two-part series, and in this video, we'll cover the basics of useEffect. So this little guy will be your game changer when it comes to managing side effects in your React components. Okay, so let's start first with understanding what a useEffect hook is. So the useEffect hook, it lets you perform side effects in your functional components. What are side effects? These are actions that happen outside of the core React rendering process. So these are anything that happens outside of the component's render cycle, like fetching data from an API, setting up subscriptions, or manipulating the DOM directly. Okay, so why is it important to use the useEffect hook? So in the pre-hooks era, we relied on lifecycle methods like component did mount and component did update to handle these side effects. And while they worked, they could lead to messy code and make it harder to reason out about component behavior. Okay, so here in useEffect, we will be having a more organized code, and it will let us run things more smoothly. Okay, so let's break down the useEffect hook. So the useEffect hook, it takes two arguments. The first one is the callback function. So this function contains the actual side effect logic that you want to run. So it can be things like making API calls, setting up timers, or adding event listeners. And then the second argument is your dependency array, which is optional. Okay, so this is an optional dependency array. This tells the useEffect when to rerun the effect. So if you leave it empty, the effect runs after every render. But by specifying dependencies like, for example, state variables or props, you can control when it triggers. So it tells the useEffect when to run the side effect. If you leave it empty, the effect runs on every render. Okay, so to further understand this, let's explore some examples. Let's start by opening our previously created React project. So navigate here to the directory where your hooks folder is located, and then open your terminal. So let's go to the terminals tab, select new terminal, and then let's run cd hooks to open our hooks folder. So here inside our hooks project folder, let's navigate inside the components folder, which is inside the src folder or the source folder, and then create a new folder named useEffect. So let's create here a new folder named useEffect, since we want to focus now on useEffect hooks, okay, and to further organize our files. And then let's start our development server by typing npm start here in the terminal. And there you go. This is our previously created project using the useState hooks. Now to remove this in our browser for now, let's go to our app.js file. Let's move this around, and then let's select this, and then let's comment this out first. Oops. There you go. so that we can start on a clean slate. Okay, and now that our project is set up, let's jump into our useEffect folder and create our first file. So let's click this icon right here to create a new file, and then let's name it fetch data.js. Click enter, and then let's begin exploring the useEffect hook. So again, the useEffect hook, this allows us to perform side effects in our functional components. When we say side effects, these are things like data fetching, setting up a subscription, and manually changing the DOM in React components. So let's begin by importing the useEffect from our React library together with the React and useState. So import React useState and then the useEffect. Oops. From React. Okay, so by the way, in this example, let's try creating a simple component that fetches data from an API using useEffect. So first, let's define our functional component first. So const fetch data, and then let's use the arrow function. And then let's don't forget the export default fetch data. Okay. And then after that, let's initialize our state variables. So let's have const data set data is equal to useState, and then let's set the initial value to null. Okay, and then let's have now our useEffect hook. So useEffect let's again use the arrow function and then fetch, and then we'll have here by the way, we will be using the JSON placeholder. So this code or this link right here, I will also put this in our description box below. So we will be using this JSON placeholder to fetch our data. So this website will provide a free fake API for testing and prototyping, and specifically we will fetch data from this endpoint right here, which is the users. And then since we want to get the first user, so the user with an ID set to 1, we will have here 1. Okay, so we want to get the details of Leon Graham. Okay, so let's just copy this link and paste it here inside our parenthesis, and let's place it inside the quotation marks as well. And then let's have the dot, then response dot JSON dot then JSON set data JSON, and then let's have an empty array. Okay, and then after that, let's have our React JSX. So let's have the return, and then let's use the this fragment to enclose our code, and then let's have here an h2. Let's say this is data fetching with useEffect. Okay, and then after that, let's have here a div. Let's have a div, and then let's set its class name to let's say data container. And then inside this div, let's have here the data. Don't worry, we'll go over this one by one later on. And then let's have here div. Oops. And then inside the div, let's have here a paragraph tag. Let's have strong, full name. Oops. And then let's have the data dot name. And then let's have another paragraph. Let's set this again to strong. Let's have the ID and let's say the user. We want to get its ID and username. And then let's have here data.id and then the data.username. Okay. And then after that, let's say we want to get the address. Okay, so let's have another paragraph for the address. So again, strong, let's emphasize this. Oops, strong. Okay, and then to access the address properties, we will be using the structure. Okay, so we'll have here the data, that address, and then dot, let's say we want to get the street. What else? Let's say we want to get the street and then the city as well as the zip code. Okay, so let's do that. A street and then data dot address, the street, and then the city. So data dot address dot city, and then finally the zip code. Zip code. Okay, and then after that, after getting its address, let's get the user's phone number. So let's have here another p tag. Let's adjust this one, and then again let's emphasize the phone number label, and then let's get the data that phone. Okay, since we only have here phone, and then after that let's get the person's website. So again, emphasize website. And then let's access the data. So data.website. And then lastly, let's get the person's company name. So another paragraph, strong, company name, and data.company, and then name, since we only want to get the company name. Okay. And then let's have here, if it is not loading, so let's put here loading. Okay, so let's go over this code line by line. So first, what we did was we imported, oops, there should be React. So we imported the React along with the useState and useEffect hooks from the React library. So again, the useState is used to create state variables in functional components, and then the useEffect, this is used to handle side effects like here in this example, the data fetching. So this line, this imports the necessary functions from the React library to build our component. So it will help us manage the data and then the side effects within the component. Okay, and then after that, we defined the a functional component called fetch data. So this defines this defines a React functional component named fetch data, and this component will be responsible for fetching data and then displaying it. And then inside our fetch data component, we first initialized our state. So we create a state variable data initialized to null. And then the set data is the function that we use to update this state. So this line right here, this uses the useState hook to create a state variable called data. And then the state variable is initially set to null because we haven't fetched any data yet. So the setData function is used to update the data state variable. Okay, and then after that, we have the useEffect hook. So this hook runs once after the component mounts because of the empty dependency array, which is here. Okay, so again, we use this JSON placeholder website to provide us a data that we will fetch from. Okay, so also here we use the fetch API to get data from the JSON placeholder, and then the response is converted to JSON, and then we update our state variable data with the fetch JSON data. Okay, so basically this code block right here, this uses the useEffect hook to fetch data from an API endpoint JSON placeholder typico.com users1. So it makes a network request to get user data. Okay, so here's what happens. The useEffect runs a function after the component renders. And then the fetch function, it retrieves data from this provided URL right here. And then this line, this part processes the response from the API and then converts it to a JavaScript object JSON. Okay, and then after that, this line right here, this updates the data state variable with the fetched data using the setData function. And then this empty dependency array right here tells the useEffect to only run this data fetching code once after the component renders initially. So if you leave the dependency array empty, the effect runs again on every render, potentially causing unnecessary refetches. Okay, and then after that, we have here our JSX syntax. So this section defines the component structure. So first, we start the render method by returning a fragment, which is this one, which allows us to group multiple elements without adding extra nodes to the DOM. Okay, and then after that, we added a heading to our component, which is this one. We displayed that we want to fetch data using the useEffect hook. And then after that, we created a div element with the class data container for styling purposes later on. And then we have here conditional rendering. So we check if the data is available. Okay, so data is not null. We display the user information. So each piece of data is wrapped here in a paragraph tag with a strong tag to bold or to emphasize the specific labels. Okay, and then if the data is not present, we display loading right here to our browser. So a conditional statement, which is this one, this checks if the data is not null, meaning the data has been fetched. So if it is true, it displays the user information using the paragraphs with bold text or emphasized text for styling purposes. And then we access user data profiles like the name, the ID, the username, the address, phone number, website, and then the company name using the dot notation. So this lines right here, this just basically displays the user's details, okay, specific details that we targeted. But if the data is null, meaning the data is still loading or it is not yet being fetched, we will display this loading message right here. And then finally, we export our fetch data component so it can be used in other parts of our application. Okay. Okay, so after that, let's add some styling to our div with a class name data container. So let's go to our app.css. Add here the .data container, and then let's text align. So we want to align the text to the left, and then we want the line height to be 8 pixels. And then don't forget to Control S or save. Okay, so here what we just did is we targeted the div with the class name set to data container, which is this one right here. And then we ensured that the text within this class is aligned to the left, and we set the space between the lines of text to 8 pixels, which makes the text more compact vertically. Okay, so now that we created our fetch data component, let's import it and display it in our browser by importing it to our app.js file to see it in our browser. Okay, so first we need to import our fetch data component. So in your app.js file, import the fetch data component at the top. So import, just like what we did previously in our useState hook. Okay, so import fetch data. So in my case, it is automatically completed right here. So import fetch data from, and then the file or the directory where it is currently saved. Okay, and then after that, let's use the fetch data component. So we'll add it here in inside our return statement. So let's call the fetch data, or let's add the fetch data component inside the app components return statement. So fetch data. And then as you can see, a while ago, it was loading. And then after loading, it displayed the full name, which is Leanne Graham. So we have Leanne Graham. And then ID is ID and username 1 and Brett. So the ID is 1. And then the username is Brett. And then address, we have the street first. So the street is Kula Slide. And then followed by the suite. So apartment 556, and then the city which is Gwenborough. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but yep, there you go. And then after that, we have the zip code. So this one is the zip code. Okay, and then after getting the address of Leanne, we also get the phone number. So we have here the user's phone number as well as the website. Okay, and then the company name. So there you go, we have the company name right here. So putting it all together, when this component is rendered, it fetch the user data from an API when the component is first rendered, and then it displayed the user's data once it is fetched, and then it also applied the specified CSS styling to ensure that the text is left aligned and compact. Okay, so this code demonstrates how to fetch data from an API using useEffect and then displays it conditionally within a React component. Okay, and a while ago, as you can see, while the data is being fetched, the message loading is displayed. So once the data is fetched and set in the state, the detailed information replaces the loading message. Okay, again, this component fetches user data from an API and then displays it in a styled format. So the useEffect hook ensures the data is fetched once the component mounts. And then the useState manages the data state. And then this conditional rendering right here ensures that a loading message is displayed while the data is being fetched. And then the CSS class data container is also used to style the container div. So that's it for fetching data using the useEffect hook. So now let's create another example to understand how useEffect handles updates. So we'll create a counter that updates the document title every time the count changes. But before that, let's create first a new file named counter.js inside our useEffect folder. So counter.js. First, let's again import the React library. So import React from React. And then let's don't forget the useEffect, since we will be using this later on. And then after that, let's define our functional component. So const counter const. Okay, let's use the arrow function, and then let's don't forget to export this component. Okay, so inside our const counter or our functional component, let's create our state variable. So const count set count is equals to useState, and then let's initialize this to 0. And also, let's don't forget to import our useState here at the very top of our file. So in my case, it is automatically added when I use the useState right here. Okay, and then after that, let's have the useEffect. So the function first, arrow function, and then let's add an array. Okay, so for the function, let's have document, the title is equals to, say, you clicked count times, and then let's have here the count in our array. And then after that, let's have the return statement. So let's again use this fragment right here, and then let's add another heading. Let's say counter with useEffect. Okay, and then let's create here a div again with the class name of data container. And then inside the div, let's add a paragraph. Say you clicked count times. Then let's have the button. So button, say on click, and then the function set count plus 1. And then let's put in here click me. Okay, so Control S to save. Okay, so what we did here is we again first imported the React, useEffect, and useState from the React library, which is necessary to use the React components. The useState and useEffect, these are the React hooks. The useState, this is used for state management, and useEffect, this is used for side effects. Okay, and then after that, we declared our functional component named counter. And then inside that component, we uses the useState hook to create a state variable count and a function set count to update it. So we initialize first our count to 0. And then here, after that, we have the useEffect hook. So this runs the provided function every time the count variable changes. Okay? By the way, the document, the title, you clicked count times. So this updates the document title with the current count, which is here at the very top. Here, this one. Okay, so this will be changed later on. And then we have here our return statement. So this returns the JSX that should be rendered. We have here a heading that displays counter with useEffect. And then we also have here a paragraph to display the current count. And then we also rendered a button that whenever it is clicked, it increments the count by 1. And lastly, we export the counter component so it can be used in other parts of the application. Okay, so now after creating our component, let's again import our counter component into our app.js file to display it in our browser. So import counter from the file location, which is components, useEffect, and counter. And then to make our output more organized, let's have here an HR, and then let's call the counter. Okay, so as you can see, when you run your React application, the browser will display this you click 0 times together with the button below the counter with useEffect, and also here the document title is now you click 0 times. Okay, so the document title in the browser tab will update to match the count right here. Okay, so the initial state is the document title will be you click 0 times, and then the text displayed on the screen will also be you click 0 times. So every time you click this click me button, the count will increment by 1. And then the text on the screen will also update to show the new count. For example, you click 25 times, and then the document title will also update to reflect the new count. Okay, so you can see it is simultaneously updating. Okay, so again, in this example, we use the useEffect with a dependency array containing count, which is this one. So this ensures that the effect runs every time the count changes, updating the document title accordingly. And whenever we click the button, the count increments and the document title also updates. Okay, so that is for our counter component. Okay, so for our final basic example, let's see how to clean up the effects. So we'll create a component that sets up and cleans up after an internal timer. So again, let's create a new file inside our useEffect folder, and then let's name it timer.js. Okay, so again, to start, we'll first import the React from React library, and then let's also import the useState and then the useEffect. And then let's define our functional component. So const timer, and then export our component, export default timer. Okay, so let's again create our state management. So const seconds and set seconds, and then let's set the initial state to 0. And let's have here the useEffect. Okay, so let's have const interval is equal set interval, and then let's call the set seconds function. Seconds plus 1, and then let's have here 1000, and then let's have here a return to clean up. This will be our cleanup function to clear the interval. So clear interval, and then interval. And then lastly, let's have the return statement right here. Let's create here again an h2. An h2, say clean up with useEffect. Say clean up and internal time. Okay, and then let's have here the h3, let's say timer then seconds. Okay, so again, here, the first thing that we did is we imported the React library, which is again necessary to use the React components together with the useState and useEffect hooks. So after that, we declared a function, a functional component named timer, and then inside the functional component timer, we use the useState hook to create a state variable seconds and a function named setSeconds to update our seconds. So we initialize the seconds to 0. And then we have here the useEffect, which runs the provided function once after the component mounts. So the const interval, set interval, and then 1000, this sets up an interval that runs every second. So 1000 is equal to 1000 milliseconds. And then the set seconds plus 1, this increments the second state by 1 every second. And then this return statement right here, return clear interval. This returns a cleanup function that clears the interval when the component unmounts to prevent memory leaks. Okay, and then finally we have here our return, which returns the JSX that should be rendered. So we first have here a heading. So this will display cleanup an internal timer with useEffect, basically our title. And then after that, we have an H3 right here. This will display the current count of seconds. And lastly, we exported the timer component. So again, it can be used in other parts of the application. Okay. And then after creating our timer component, let's again import this to our app.js file to display it in our browser. So import timer from components, useEffect, and then the timer. So inside this div, let's again create an HR, and then let's call on the timer. Okay, so basically when you run this application, the timer will automatically start and then increment the seconds value every seconds. Okay, so the display time will increment by 1 every second, and then it will also update every second to show the elapsed time or the new count. Okay, so basically, this code right here, this shows us how to create a simple React component that acts as a timer using the useEffect and useState hooks. So by following what we did in this video, you get to learn how to handle state and side effects in functional components, and how to display dynamic content that updates over time in your React applications. Okay, so we've covered how to use the useEffect hook to perform side effects like data fetching, updating the document title, and then setting up the intervals. So watch out for our next videos for more example of useEffect hooks. So subscribe to our channel to be updated on our future videos. Thanks for watching!